Good afternoon. It's Tuesday afternoon at 2. You're here for Foundations Live, and today we're talking all about designing better home adaptations. And as well as designing better home adaptations, we'll also be having an update from Rachel on housing without delays. That'll become a little bit later in the afternoon.
Foundations Live.
Right, afternoon, everybody. Good for you to join us today. Just some introductions as usual. So I'm Paul Smith, I'm Director at Foundations. We're the national body for home improvement agencies and disabled facilities grants in England, and we're funded by the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government. So we're here to support you with anything to do with disabled facilities grants and home improvement agencies. If you're after closed captions today, and if you're watching on the website, if you scroll down to the bottom of the page, you can find the links for LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube, where we're also streaming this, and you can find closed captions over there. So, as mentioned, today we're going to be talking about all sorts of issues around designing adaptations. But just before we start, just a flag that the new version of our website for the public, which is adaptmyhome.org.uk, is about to go live. So at some point this afternoon, hopefully during Foundations Live, it will filter through cyberspace and appear live. So we'll share that with you as and when that happens. Hopefully, excitingly this afternoon. But as I mentioned, today we're going to be talking very much around designing better home adaptations. For those of you that may have been at the OT show last week, it's good to see you. And I did go through some of this then. So for those of you who were there then, here's a reminder. And if you weren't, here it is for the first time. So designing better home adaptations. And when I did this last week, being live, I could be a little bit more interactive. So please do join in the comments and on the chat, so that we can get to see what you think as we kind of go through this presentation. So, are you a designer? Do you consider yourself a designer? So maybe you are a technical officer and you do design work for adaptations, but equally, are you an OT or a trusted assessor or a caseworker? Do you consider yourself a designer? And feel free to join in on the chat. So here's, there we go. A little bit too clicky on the buttons. So here's a guy called Herbert Simon. He's an American psychologist, economist, and computer scientist. And he was best known for redefining the idea of design as a universal human activity. And one of his quotes was, "Everyone designs who devises courses of action aimed at changing existing situations into preferred ones." So a kind of fairly broad description of a designer. So based on that, do you think you're a designer? Most people are saying yes. So one person said, "I'm a technical officer. I draw, but I do not design." Okay. So we'll see as we go through. See if you change your mind. But we're going to start off with the lady Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who you may have heard of. She was an Associate Justice of the US Supreme Court up until 2020, who did a lot around kind of gender equality and civil rights. And one of her quotes was that words matter. They can shape meaning and perception. And that we're thinking about the word adaptation. So it's the word that's very commonly used across the UK in terms of home adaptations around disability. And the kind of definition that I found of adaptation was fixing something because it doesn't work for us. So very much based around somebody's deficits or things that somebody can't do. But I've recently come back from Australia, where I was talking to a lot of people about the same thing, but they call it home modifications over there. In fact, much of the rest of the world talks about home modifications rather than home adaptations. And the kind of definition of modification is making something work the way we want it to, which I think is a bit more positive in terms of the framing of the term. And can we think about other modification in other sectors, the ways that the term modification is used or mod is used? So cars, for example, quite often term mod is used around cars and making them look or customizing them to the way you want them to be. Similarly with computer games, you quite often get mods on computer games, making them work and run the way you want them to. And clothes can be modded as well. So making them, I suppose, kind of specific for you or kind of suiting your requirements, likes, wants, circumstances. So it's kind of thinking about whether, if we're kind of thinking about language, whether adaptations and the association with meeting a deficit or something that's wrong is perhaps less helpful than a term of modifications, which is making something that works better for us individually. Which we'll come back to. We'll come back to that thought a little bit later in the presentation. But first, or no, the third person I want to introduce you to is a guy called Professor Per Olaf Hedvall. He's a director at Lund University in Sweden, and he's one of the leading thinkers around universal design and accessibility. And one of his quotes is that every design decision carries a message. And he does quite a lot of online blogs and articles that if you've got kind of half an hour spare, is very, very interesting to read, because one of the things with Per Olaf is he's also a wheelchair user. So he comes a lot of this thing from a kind of user perspective or having that life experience. And this is a picture that he posted on one of his blogs where he had taken a train. I assume it was in Sweden. And this was the view from where he was sat on the train. So what he was talking about in the blog was, is this accessible, usable, or universal design? And I've kind of shown a picture here from a British train, so you can kind of see a comparison that might be a little bit more familiar. But so the train, he said, Per Olaf said, was... Sorry, somebody phoning me. I'll turn that off. The train was accessible in a mechanistic sense, so there were no steps to get in. He had access to a large toilet and a place where he could sit, and he got from point A to point B. So the train's design met basic accessibility standards. But usability, he didn't have a table, he didn't have a power socket, so he couldn't do any work as he had planned. He wasn't particularly satisfied with the situation and got nothing done. Kind of in the article, so he's also kind of sat somewhere near the toilets, which I don't know if they have those curved doors in Sweden like they do here, that most people don't seem to be able to lock effectively, but that's kind of where he was sat on the train. So he felt isolated from the other, and he called them normal, typical passengers, treated as different and less worthy. So his view was that the usability of the train was rubbish. And then in terms of universal design, not even close. So it was a good, or per example, depending on your perspective, of something that was designed quite recently, but still exhibiting outdated values. And he kind of put across it was a good example of where a universal design set would have inspired a different layout and experience. And this is the diagram that he shared in this blog. So you kind of build upon a core of accessibility. Then the next level is usability, giving you kind of effectiveness, efficiency, and satisfaction. And then universal design is where you've got kind of equity and equality and non-stigmatization. So I think one of the really good examples of universal design is probably supermarkets, where so you can get a trolley in, access is kind of perfectly flat, and you have automatic doors, which you have for the trolley, but equally for anybody with a pushchair or a wheelchair, it's also then really easy to get that access. So I thought what we'd do is have a little game of accessible, usable, or universal design. And I was inspired by Per Olaf to go around searching on Google, which isn't always a good thing to do. I did go searching on Google for various pictures of different types of adaptations that have been done. So it'd be good to get your views on whether each one of these you feel is accessible, usable, or universal design. So fingers at the ready on the comments, and let's start with the first one. I suppose kind of fairly typical DFG bathroom. What do you think? Accessible, usable, or universal design? So just give a couple of moments for the messages to start coming through. Okay, some usables, couple of accessibles. Kevin, that wasn't one of the options. Sure, a couple of people adding universal design. Okay, let's have a couple more then. See what you think of the next one. So here's another bathroom. What do we think of this one? So if we're thinking about the spectrum from accessible through usable to universal design, I think in terms of universal design, can you tell that that's a home adaptation or a DFG funded bathroom? I noticed it was a square toilet as well. If anyone's ever had a square toilet, it's incredibly difficult to find a toilet seat. And if you've ever come to the roadshow that we do in London, they have triangle toilets in the hotel, which I always kind of think must be almost impossible to find a replacement toilet seat for. Okay, so mix again of thoughts on that one. So how about this one? Don't think this is a UK bathroom, but what's your thoughts on this one in terms of accessible, usable, or universal design? Interesting. Few more universals for this one. Interesting. So we do have some more pictures coming up a little bit later of bathrooms, but let's move on to some ramps then. What do you think of this one? Accessible, usable, or universal design? I did think that as well, Kelly. Mostly accessible. I spent some time on Google, Kevin. That's where I found them. Okay, mostly accessible. What do you think of this one? Okay, I think we've moved from accessible to usable. A few universals in there as well. Yeah, a few more universals coming through now. And then final one, it's another kind of ramped access. Interesting. Some of these obviously weren't done through. I assume they weren't done through DFGs. I think you do get a little bit of a different perspective by looking at what can be done as kind of access or adaptations in other countries, other circumstances. So we do have some more pictures in a minute, but one of the other people I'd like you to meet is Sir Ralph Speth, who was the mechanical engineer and chief exec of Jaguar Land Rover from 2010 to 2020. There you can see him with the Queen I think that was on a visit to Wolverhampton. And one of the things one of his quotes was, "If you think good design is expensive, you should look at the cost of bad design." And it was just kind of going back to this bathroom, which we looked at earlier, and how often that ends up like that at kind of the next change of tenancy, and whether something like that is good value for money. If it's going to end up something like that, let's say maybe in a year, maybe in 2 years. Certainly, when we've been doing going around the country and meeting people, sometimes it's within a matter of weeks. And then the next person I wanted you to meet was a guy called Trevor Kletz. On a similar theme, he was talking about, if you think safety is expensive, try an accident. And he founded the kind of field of process safety management and what you can learn from disasters and when things go wrong. And I think this links into the CDM regulations, which a lot of you said you consider yourself designers earlier in the presentation. So, are you all following the CDM regs when you were doing your design? Do you understand what the CDM regs are and how they apply to you? Because they're all about safe design and management of construction works. Current regulations came out in 2015, although they were originally introduced back in the 90s. And it was in a response to, I suppose, what building sites were like back in the 70s and 80s. Dad used to work on building sites, so I used to spend a lot of Saturday mornings on building sites, and they definitely weren't a particularly safe environment to be in thinking back. And I think on average, one person died every day on a construction site back in the 70s and 80s. So the CDM regs were introduced, and it applies to all construction work. So it's from anything from fitting a grab rail through to building HS2. But the idea is that it's proportional. So obviously you don't have the same level of documentation or input for fitting a grab rail as you would to building HS2. But it is a legal requirement to comply with the CDM regs. And I know I've kind of been going around talking about CDM regs in the past. Some local authorities have felt that they're kind of too busy to kind of, I suppose, implement them or use them or be aware of them. But adaptations, I suppose, are a relatively safe bit of the construction sector, but it's not to say that people haven't died or been injured. And there's just kind of 3 cases that I found of people have died at home due to some sort of faulty adaptation bit of kit. There was a young boy died as a result of a stairlift tragedy while I worked in Telford about 20 years ago. Again, it wasn't a DFG funded lift, it was a privately funded lift, but something went wrong with that. This girl died in the southwest, kind of got squashed by a through floor lift, and the top left there was a granddad. Again, it wasn't a DFG funded case, but did fall through the floor after an aperture had been cut for a level access shower. So it's not without risk carrying out these sort of works. And in terms of the CDM regulations, there are 3 key roles. So there's the client, that's somebody who wants to carry out or wants somebody to carry out construction work for them. There's the contractor who does the actual carrying out of the construction work. And then in the middle, there is the designer. So it's the person or people that design what's going to be built. So do you consider yourself a designer under CDM? So where does design begin in the DFG process, or I guess kind of the adaptation process? If we take a look at kind of the typical flow chart, start with assessment, then go to recommendation, design, construction, and then use. So the assessment is about identifying what's the problem. The recommendation is what needs to happen in general. And then the design is how it will be built. So how that will be done safely and effectively. So if we look at some typical examples, and where does that red line fall between recommendation and design? So for a bathroom, to have an assessment that the person can't get into or out of the bath safely. The recommendation to replace the bath with a level access shower to allow safe, independent washing. And then if you're deciding where the shower tray goes, the layout of the toilet, basin, type of screen or curtain, product choices, drainage details, etc., then you're past that red line and you are a designer. So if you're involved with any of those decisions, then you are definitely a designer under the CDM regs. There may be other designers, but if you're involved with making any of those decisions or specifying any of those elements, you do need to know about the CDM regs. So Massimiliano, I would suspect you probably are a designer. Similarly with external access, maybe the assessment, the person can't get to the house because of a high threshold, that'd be the assessment. Recommendation to provide a ramp to create level access from the front door. But then if you're deciding where the ramp will go, its gradient, its width, its landing size, handrail, surface type, kind of past that red line and you are a designer. And third example around door widening. So a person can't get through the internal door. So the recommendation is to widen the doorways. And then if you're doing decisions around which walls are altered, how to support the lintel, what door set to use, you're kind of beyond that red line. And again, you are then the designer, which isn't definitely isn't a bad thing or something to be wary of particularly, but you do need to understand the CDM regs and what you need to do in your role as designer under the law. So what does a designer need to do? I'll try to summarize it in these 5 key things. So first one, and this is kind of one of the key things around CDM, is you eliminate, reduce, or control foreseeable risks. So you're thinking ahead before the work starts. You're identifying hazards that could arise during construction, use, and maintenance of the bathroom, ramp, or whatever during the rest of its life cycle. And the idea is that you remove where possible or reduce any risks that you might see. So, for example, if you were thinking about a wall-hung basin, you would be thinking about how it could be safely fixed to the wall, how it could be maintained, and how it would be kind of cleaned and used afterwards. You would share key information. So one of the key requirements is that you share information with other people, other designers or the contractor. So you highlight design risks, special requirements, and add any notes so that information is passed on. So for example, if you're aware that the client has asthma and need protecting from dust, you would need to you should be adding a note about that as part of any documentation you prepare and share with others. Coordinating with others, so other surveyors, contractors, manufacturers, sharing any information so that everyone's aware. And it's about treating safety as a team responsibility and not an afterthought. If there are several people involved in a design, maybe like an OT, manufacturer or supplier, then you would have a principal designer, which probably in most cases would be the kind of technical officer or surveyor who would coordinate all the information from other people involved in the design. Keep it proportionate. So this is kind of what I said before, is that the details for a grab rail will be very different to the details you do for HS2, for example. But the more complex a project gets, then the kind of more coordination and detail you would provide, but it doesn't need to be war and peace. You just need to make sure that the appropriate information is detailed, shared, documented. And last one is designing for the future. So it's thinking beyond the current installation, thinking about how it will be cleaned, serviced, replaced safely. Can you access the back of something if it will need some sort of part replacing, like pumps behind panels or lights over awkward spaces you can't get to change the light bulb particularly easily. It's thinking about the future and future occupants. So as long as you've done those kind of 5 things, you've pretty much ticked all the boxes as a designer, and you'll be compliant with the CDM regs. So do you think you're a designer? I mean, as kind of said, Massimo, even if somebody else is approving the plans, if you're putting them together, you're involved with the design process. So I would say you do need to be aware of the CDM regs. Jenny, I think it depends. So if yeah, so Kate, I think assuming you're a OT, Kate, your surveyor would be the principal designer, but you would still be a designer, so you still need to think about the risks involved. So it depends, Jenny, on how detailed your recommendations are. If you're saying that specific things need to be in specific places, or specific shower trays, stair lifts, whatever, are to be used that you've specified, then you need to think about the safety of them. If you're just saying that somebody needs a stair lift and then leaving the details to the others or somebody else, if you're just saying that somebody needs a level access shower and you're not going into much further detail, then you wouldn't be a designer. But if you're starting to talk about where in the room the shower tray goes, for example, or distance from the toilet to the wall, then it's starting. You start to get into being a designer, and you have to kind of be cognizant of CDM and how it works. So hopefully that was clear in terms of CDM. We've just released a more detailed 3-hour CDM course that's going to run in the new year. It's already sold out, but we will be putting more on, I'm sure. But we do also have some e-training and a guide on the website that I think is quite helpful in terms of understanding CDM. And there's also some documentation there that you can use if you're not already using that. So I wanted to move on next to a guy called Frank Chimero. He's a designer and writer from New York. And one of his quotes is that people ignore design that ignores people, which I thought quite nicely led me on to this new report that came out. It came out last month, even though it says 2022 there and was written in 2022. It wasn't actually released till last month. And it was some research done by Arabs involving conversations and measurements with real people about kind of demographics and ergonomic requirements for Part M of the building regs, which is the section that looks at how buildings, including dwellings, should be designed for people with a disability. And its aim was to identify where kind of current standards fall short and what spatial and ergonomic requirements are needed to make buildings safer, more usable, and more inclusive in the future, which is for any of you involved with designing adaptations. Anyone said they're a designer earlier in the session today. Really useful read. Really useful read. So I've just gone through and kind of picked out 10 things that I think have a some particular relevance for DFGs and adaptations. So number one, they found that space was the biggest barrier to usability, and that the current spatial standards are too small for many disabled people. So a kind of 1500 by 1500 or 1500 millimeter turning circle works for only a minority of wheelchair users, and that approach and maneuvering space requirements are larger in reality than in the current building regs. So that kind of first recommendation was to think about space first, and that maybe kind of moving walls to allow a large bathroom may be required to make it really usable. And that they also looked at the approach to bathrooms and that kind of the width of doors, width of hallways, and access to the bathroom can be as much of a hindrance as the bathroom itself. So I did say there were some more photos coming up, and again, I kind of went searching on Google for more photos, and I struggled to find some that really illustrated what it was saying in this Arab report. So these are for illustrative purposes only and aren't recommendations or necessarily good practice, but I think they kind of show some of the things that they were talking about in the Arabs report, but I would have liked some better photos, but this is what we got. This is what we got. So in terms of space, and you can see this one, that there's quite a lot of space in this particular bathroom. I wasn't entirely sure whether it was a real bathroom, looking at the way the walls and windows fit together, or whether this was kind of an AI or a render. But just kind of looking at the amount of space that goes around the bathroom, in this particular case. So item 3, or point 3, was around reach, and they found that kind of what people could reach was actually different from both the British Standard and the approved document M. That many participants in the study found it really difficult to reach forward, particularly from wheelchairs, kind of beyond their foot plates, and that side reach was often more reliable and comfortable for them than reaching forwards. And then also thinking about accompanied or assisted use. And again, in the research, they found that many disabled people rely on assistants, carers, or companions, and obviously more space is required when a second person is involved. So this one again was just to illustrate the carer screens for somebody helping, and that the shelves, again slightly out the way there, but were at the side rather than at the front. Again, definitely not the perfect photo, but as illustrative as I could find. The next two, number 5 was about poor contrast and glare, giving reduced usability and confidence. Think back to that photograph I showed earlier of the white tiles, white sanitary ware, white toilet seat, white grab rails, white curtain, which had, I don't think it had any contrast. But the clear visual contrast between key surfaces and avoiding shiny or reflective finishes is really important. And that comfort and ease can influence whether the space is actually used. So similar to what kind of Per Olaf was saying earlier, that something might be accessible, but is it actually usable? So again, not the perfect image by any means, but some contrast, and kind of particularly the grab rails and the toilet seat there, some contrast, and a slightly more homely feel in terms of the walls and the wall paneling. And this kind of led on to think about the psychological and emotional factors that people want spaces that support dignity, privacy, and independence, and that meaningful engagement and co-design with disabled people is very much recommended, and layouts that feel normal and respectful. And again, kind of thinking about what we talked about with CDM, that designs must allow for change over time. So different people using different aids at different stages and in different situations, and potentially different residents and occupants being in the buildings in the future as well. So this again was an image that I found searching around Google. I'm not quite sure what that door is at the back, because it's very narrow, but again, thinking perhaps more towards the universal design. Then the last two were again somewhat linked to CDM in terms of cleanability and maintenance, affect the long-term accessibility. So choosing finishes and fittings that are simple to clean and maintain, especially if you're in a small room, is really important. And kind of the last one was about usability and accessibility being inseparable, which I suppose slightly or does tie in with kind of what Per Olaf was saying, that an accessible bathroom must also be a livable bathroom, should be safe, easy to move around, and comfortable enough to use every day. So this was, I say, a report that was done back in 2022 to inform what will happen with Part M of the building regs going forwards, but I think is also a really useful read for anybody involved in designing home adaptations as well. And there was a final bathroom, which again was I think very much towards the universal design end. But I think it's with these, not necessarily copying them per se, but perhaps using them as you would do a show home or Ideal Home magazine, to maybe be inspired by ways to do things with a little bit more differently, a little bit more imagination in the future, rather than the kind of white tiles, white showers, white grab rails that are often seen. So next person I want to introduce you to, I've already introduced you to them, is Rachel Russell, and she gave me a somewhat longer quote than this, but to paraphrase, design is doing something with that element of intentionality about it. And Rachel did a PhD around kind of adaptations and design, and one of the things she developed as part of that was a professional reasoning tool that is, I suppose, it's kind of simplest form is kind of a checklist that helps you to think about whether a person can do a task safely, whether it supports dignity and independence, whether the layout makes life easier, and whether it will still work as needs change. And I think we've all seen adaptations that don't necessarily meet the standard, don't really work for the person. And then the idea behind the tool is that it helps us to think about not just a shower, but a shower that someone can use without help. Not just a ramp, but a ramp someone feels confident using. And not just equipment, but a home that feels like home. So we're going to do a little bit of work on developing this further, linking in some of the things we've talked about earlier today around CDM regs. And so that there's kind of a tool that either as OTs or technical officers or surveyors you can use to think through and document some of your thoughts around kind of safe and effective design of adaptations, and kind of capturing that detail that other people need to know that you need to share as part of that process. So the idea is it won't be just a form, it'll be a tool that will help us kind of design out any risks, make sure that the builder knows what they need to know as part of the construction process, think about things that will affect cleaning or maintenance into the future, and that support flexibility so that it's an adaptation that's there to improve the accessibility of the property in the long term and not potentially be ripped out at the next change of tenant or owner. So that'll be coming in the new year. But finally, one last person I want to introduce you to is a chap called David Kelly. And one of his quotes was, "If you can't draw it, you can't make it." And going back to the term modification or mod, we wanted to introduce you to a little chap called Moddy that we met when we were in Australia, and a way to communicate your ideas more easily. So here's little Moddy the Mole, and he's all about home adaptation drawings and how to make them simple. So the idea with Moddy is that we can help you sketch, explain and share clear plans without technical fuss, and help you to show what is needed from bathrooms to ramps in just a few clicks. So it comes in two flavors. There's a 2D version and a 3D version. And the 2D version is ideal for marking up photos in seconds for things like grab rails. And it also can do simple sketches of ramps, so you've got clear images to share with clients and contractors. So here's one I did earlier. Just make that a little bit bigger so you can see it. So 45 Shore Street. I think I pressed pause. I'm just going to move that on again. So 45 Shore Street, we'll create that as a project. There it is, click into it. So I'm going to upload a photo that I took of the toilet. There we go, there's the toilet in the corner of the bathroom. And I want to put a grab rail. I want a grab rail fixed on the wall. So I'll just do a quick sketch of the grab rail. Say I want a white one. Let's make it 300 millimeters long. And then I want to show the dimension from the back wall. So let's pop that in there. 400 millimeters. And let's also put the distance from the floor so it's in exactly the right place. There we go, 650 millimeters from or 550 millimeters from the floor. Then I can download that image and either share it, put it into a report or whatever. So within a minute, I've got a nicely annotated picture of what I want to do with my toilet and grab rail. So here's another one. I wanted to do a very quick picture of a ramp. I don't think I moved that on. I think I was playing that one again. Let's do the one of the ramp. There we go, ramp lane. So here I want to just do a very quick annotation of a ramp that I want to send to a manufacturer. So go into the ramp section. Let's pick a standard ramp. I don't want that high, so let's trim that down to a 300mm ramp. At the bottom there, I can see that based on a 3,000m or 3,000mm distance, that's a 1 in 10. I can flip it around if I want it the other way. I can add some handrails in at the back and the front, and let's I don't want them 1,000. Let's have them 900mm high instead. So I got very quickly designed, annotated picture of a ramp that again I can download and share with a manufacturer, contractor, or supplier. Now moving on to Modi 3D, which it's about creating layouts for bathrooms, ramps, and other spaces. So you can check turning circles, show options to clients and builders. And again, you can export the image for reports and case notes. So this is me doing a bathroom. So each of the big squares you can see on the paper is a meter. So that's a 2 meter by 2.5 meter bathroom. I'll bring in a door, make that a little bit narrower. So that's a 5mm wide door, twizzle it round, pop it in the wall. Then let's add a toilet. Pop it in there. That's a little bit too wide, so let's just make that a 500mm wide toilet. That's in place. Add in a basin, twizzle it round. Let's make it a little bit narrower as well. So let's make that 650 wide basin, pop it against the wall. And then let's see what it looks like with a bath. So let's pop the bath in there. I can grab the handles, quickly resize the bath to the size I need. Let's have a look at that in 3D. So very quickly, quick 3D image of the bathroom. I could have put a window in there if I wanted to, or added some more details, but just for this demo, there's just a quick sketch of the bathroom with the sanitary ware in. Let's take out the bath and put in a shower former. I'm not a big fan of curtains. Let's have a glass panel in there. Let's put the shower control in. Again, twizzle it around, move it back to the wall. And how does that look? We're going to twizzle it around again. Got a fully annotated dimension sketch. I can turn those dimensions off individually again if I want to. Let's go back in, maybe add in an extra grab rail in the shower area. Let's have a T rail. So let's go back into 2D. Pop it there, twizzle it around so it's against the wall. There we go. And then shall we also have a drop-down rail? Let's pop that next to the toilet. That's currently 1 meter high. That's a little bit too high up the wall, so let's drop that down a bit lower. And let's have another look at that. So within 2 minutes, I've got a nice little design that can either export or show the client. So you can download that as an image, either in 2D or 3D. You can also do ramps and other bits and pieces with Modi, and there he is. He looks very happy with himself, doesn't he? So for people who want Modi 2D, so just to mark up photos and show simple home adaptations, it's $6.91 per user per month. And then for 3D, it's $12.34 per user per month. You can use it free for a week. You can cancel at any time. And if you would like quite a lot of users, then please do get in touch and we can work out a deal for you. So hope you like Moddy. Went down very well at the OT show last week. We think it's quite a nice addition to what's available, and the developers are working on it all the time, so they're adding new features as we go. So moddy.io.uk, you can see all the details, sign up for a free 7-day trial, give it a go. Hope you like it. There we go. There's Moddy. Right. Let's remove Moddy, and I will bring. Let's bring
Foundations Live.
Let's bring Rachel back in. I'll hand over to you to give us an update on housing without delay.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. Yeah, I'm just going to go through a presentation I gave with Lauren Walker from the Royal College last week at the OT show, just providing a little bit of an update of where we've got to with housing without delay. And yeah, we're looking for your support going forward in terms of the practitioner toolkit, but I'll come on to that in a minute. Yeah, a huge thank you to Closemat as well, who are supporting ourselves alongside the Royal College of OT on housing without delay. So yeah, huge thank you to Closemat for their support. Hopefully, because I know I've spoken a couple of times on Foundations Live in terms of housing without delay, and we had a special webinar, but it's for those that aren't familiar with the work, or those that just need a bit of a refresher. It's building on the prior work that the Royal College did with minor adaptations without delay, which was around getting adaptations quicker into social housing. That was back in 2006. And then the work that ARCOT did with the housing lane back in 2019, which was around promoting the unique skills that we have as occupational therapists in housing, and particularly adaptations, and the types of cases that we can really add value with in terms of, yeah, particularly with DFG. So housing without delay, I guess, is the evolution to adaptations without delay. And it's about recognising the range of skills and knowledge that we have as occupational therapists, and how that can support our housing and planning colleagues in designing and developing better housing for people, but also just the other roles that occupational therapists have a kind of across the spectrum of roles that housing have within local authorities and wider as well. So yeah, it's just demonstrating that unique contribution that we have, and how we can support housing colleagues deliver what they need to deliver in terms of supporting health and well-being through better housing. And I think for us as well, it's about shifting that culture that housing isn't just for housing OTs, isn't just for social care OTs, and that all OTs, whether you're working in an acute hospital setting, whether you're a community rehab OT, we're all working with people that live in some type of home. It might not necessarily be the home that they would choose to live in. And therefore we can all start having those good conversations with people to help them think about how they can use their housing better to support their everyday needs. So really shifting that culture, and for all OTs to feel that they have some contribution to having good housing conversations with people. So that's the vision that ARCOT has with housing without delay. Yeah, I've used this picture a few times. I think those of you that have practiced for a while as occupational therapists will know that we tend to work in real silos of practice. So you're either a hospital OT, or a social care OT, or a housing OT, or a reablement OT. And it's trying to shift that culture from silos of working, because at the end of the day, we're all occupational therapists. We all have that fundamental belief that people's health and well-being is maintained when we're able to do those everyday activities that are important to us, and the majority of our activities happen in housing in our homes. So we need to shift, from silos of practice, and for all OTs to see housing in one form or another as part of their responsibility. One of the things I've been doing with Housing Without Delay is using various social media channels as well as the communities channels on our new community platform, just to ask a range of occupational therapists, not just occupational therapists working in social care, but OTs working in other settings, just to tell us about a little bit about how housing issues actually present in their day-to-day work. So one of the messages that I got from a number of OTs working in A&E and the acute hospital setting was around how the lack of adapted housing and accessible housing makes discharge really challenging. Just try to find suitable properties and just creating those system bottlenecks. So really struggling to get people out of hospital and that landing on those OTs working in those acute settings. Heard from lots of occupational therapists just about how our current housing stock, these next 2 points won't be new to many of us as occupational therapists, but how kind of our current housing stocks just many of them don't have the layout and are designed poorly. So kind of providing those structural limitations to, when we are wanting to do adaptations, makes actually installing adaptations challenging, as well as just the layouts of properties making everyday activities more and more difficult as we experience in, sensory cognitive motor impairments, be it through long-term conditions or the aging process. Heard from quite a lot of rehab OTs saying how, as we know, we're getting that shift from hospitals into homes, and actually how the current housing stock really is unsuitable to support that shift and support that sickness to prevention model, because, homes were never designed to be places where rehab happens. So lots of the old housing stock makes kind of that rehab process and that preventing therapeutic progress when we're working with people and doing the rehab in people's homes. I thought that was a really interesting viewpoint. A number of OTs working in and around and across mental health raised these next couple of concerns that they have and what's impacting on their day-to-day work as OTs in mental health was around kind of the general housing conditions, so mold and damp. Just being able to maintain people's home environments, really impacting on people's existing both physical as well as mental health conditions. So, just as OTs, those issues that we have, as well as just again poor living conditions contributing to mental health deterioration. Yeah, and I think it's been really interesting because I've heard from lots of occupational therapists that work outside of housing, who work outside of social care, but really recognising that even in their day-to-day work, these kind of everyday housing issues that we experience, how that is impacting on their job, be it, an OT working in a hospital through to an OT doing rehab and those OTs working in mental health. The other question I asked those OTs was around how are OTs working beyond their traditional boundaries. So this isn't necessarily OTs working in social care and housing that you would expect them to be doing this job. This is the OTs working in for example, spinal units, supporting hospital discharges and those bits and pieces, and mental health. So you are getting OTs getting involved in designing housing at the planning stages. Lots of advocacy being done, supporting people moving. So doing lots of, providing information to housing providers, etc. Some really interesting work being done around housing and discharge pathways. So there's been a couple of, I think it's Edinburgh, I think they got an award in the last couple of weeks, some of the really good work that those Scottish OTs have done up in Scotland around discharge and housing for spinal injury patients. There's also a number of OTs that have worked on a project, I think it's Guy's St Thomas, around housing and discharging young children on ventilators and stuff. So some really interesting work being done, working in a multidisciplinary way. Kind of rehousing support, as well as lots of OTs within mental health, really supporting people who may be at risk of homelessness due to underlying mental health issues, and supporting those tenants to actually maintain their tenancies who might otherwise be at risk. So we are seeing lots of OTs that work in hospitals, who work in kind of non-traditional social care housing areas, already kind of getting involved in that, as well as the brilliant work that's already been done by a number of housing and social care OTs. Just in terms of what we were told about how OT expertise is being used in housing and planning. So I know we've got a few people on the call, so I know we've got Jaquel here this afternoon. So doing that really early. What I could see is almost like that public health bit, really getting involved at the planning stage, at that communities level, development level, and actually supporting housing and planning to build the right thing in the first place, as well as linking into that strategic input and ensuring that we're not only designing the right homes, but also having input in terms of the community spaces as well. Lots of OTs working and making sure that we're, in terms of rehousing, that we're getting that allocation right. I've mentioned supporting people who may be vulnerable in terms of their tenancy. Some really interesting stuff around kind of on the spirit of, I guess, adaptations without delay, kind of, you know, how we as OTs can share our knowledge around occupations so that others working in housing can develop those skills to help them in their jobs. As well as lots of OTs that are looking at trying to improve the system and breaking down those silos of work, particularly as we move into more neighbourhood ways of working, as we see that shift from community out there. Just in terms of what we're trying to achieve with housing without delay, and I'm sorry because I know I've shared this a few times, but how we want to I guess achieve that vision of OTs being in the mix of housing is that we are developing 3 toolkits. We have more or less finished the strategic toolkit. So this is an influencing report that is targeted at kind of system leaders. So those are ICS leaders, public health, housing, planning, town and country, all of those people that are who are in a position at that system level to look at actually how they could be using housing or occupational therapists within housing and planning and housing wider, and making that economic case and showcasing. So I'll come on to that in a minute, just to help you understand what that report will look like. The operational toolkit, we're in there. I'm up to my ears with case studies and bits and pieces, but this is going to be an online resource, a practical guide for those that are in that position of potentially developing some of these OT housing roles and generating the business model. So I'll talk a little bit about what that's going to look like. And the call for action this afternoon is we're moving into starting to plan the practitioner toolkit. So this is something that will be up and I'll be in the midst of come the new year. So I'm really keen to get any suggestions this afternoon, or if you can email me, but I will come on to that shortly. So I just want to quickly talk about the methodology, just so that you know it's just not me and the project team involved in this piece of work, and just a bit about the methodology that we've used. So for the strategic toolkit, we've very much done a desktop research on policy and practice across the 4 nations. In terms of the project group, we have got Shane and Jill, who are 2 very well-known housing occupational therapists in Scotland and Northern Ireland, who are doing a brilliant job at supporting this piece of work. We've done a variety of interviews with strategic leads as well to get an understanding from a planning perspective, from a public health perspective, from a housing perspective, kind of their views around what are some of the policy challenges that they have with housing and potentially how we can support as occupational therapists. And then I have done umpteen, myself, Shane and Jill have done umpteen interviews with, I think, every variety of occupational therapists. And again, I know there's a few people here this afternoon. So, for example, Victoria and Jaquel and others here this afternoon that I've done interviews with. Again, across NHS, social care, housing and planning, housing association and independent OTs, because there's some really good work that independent OTs are doing in terms of medical legal stuff, and insurance companies recognizing the value of working alongside OTs, because when OTs get involved in housing, we're very good at being creative problem solvers and can use adaptations to potentially reduce the long term costs of those who've experienced catastrophic injuries. So we've captured a number of independent OT work, as well as independent OTs that work and advise housing associations. So we've got a variety of occupational therapists that we've done interviews with and started to capture that. I've got the date wrong on this, but we're also we've got an engagement activity tomorrow. It's actually tomorrow on the ARCOT Communities platform. It's the very first communities conversation, and that's tomorrow, where we'll be going to have a discussion around what kind of resources do OTs need, the community need, in terms of that practitioner toolkit. As I say, we've done a 4-nation perspective. As I say, on the project group, we've got Shane and Jill, who are very experienced OTs in Scotland and Northern Ireland. And we've got really good links as well with a number of OTs in Wales. One of the things, what we're doing is we're not trying to create new roles. We're about amplifying existing good practice. So we're using what's already being done out there. The proof is in the pudding, as it were. And so we're using case studies to actually amplify the brilliant practice that is already out there. We've got a very comprehensive steering group. As I say, we're not trying to reinvent the wheel. We've got a very comprehensive steering group as well that is supporting the team in doing this piece of work. So let me just run through. This is the strategic toolkit, which I've already mentioned, gives you a feel there for who we're targeting with that there. And it's about positioning OTs as solutions to some of the policy and strategic challenges, but opportunities that local authorities have got at the moment, and creating the evidence-based argument that demonstrates that really OTs involved at that strategic level can really support in terms of addressing housing as a determinant of health. This is just what the report covers. As I say, this is currently with the ARCOT, just giving it the ARCOT tone of voice. So it covers occupational therapy, a bit of history around the link between occupational therapy, home and health. Does a little bit around social determinant of health, as well as making that link around how occupation supports health, and therefore how housing supports the everyday activities that we need to do. Really looking at the intersection of housing, health and social care, and how occupational therapists are actually probably one of the only AHPs, allied health professionals, that are truly at the intersection of housing, health and social care. And I think we've got a real opportunity, particularly as we start working towards neighbourhood ways of working, as health moves out into community, or NHS Trust move out into community. I think that's a real unique selling point that we've got, and hopefully this strategic document will support with that system change that is underway as we speak. Does a little bit of systems thinking, talks about housing challenges that we've got, and then actually how occupational therapy can be a solution to those challenges and opportunities. And again, we're going to have case studies, or we have got case studies that make that point there. So that's more or less done, and it's just with ARCOT at the moment, getting its makeover, as it were, in terms of just getting the ARCOT tone of voice into that report. This is the bit that I'm in up to my ears in. I don't mean that in a negative way, I mean in a very positive way. So this is the operational toolkit, and it's for really targeted towards AHP leads, service managers, housing teams from an operational point of view that might be wanting to think about, actually, yes, we can see the value of using OTs, but actually, how do we go about it? So it's going to be an online resource providing just practical tools to help implement and expand the roles across housing planning and development. So we've got umpteen case studies. I hate to think how many case studies that we've got, and again, a number of people here this afternoon have contributed to those, so we're just developing those to send off to get those checked out. We've got role profiles, and we've also got business cases. So we've got kind of 4 business cases, because I've got another slide in a minute, because there is no one housing OT, as it were. There's kind of a number of roles at housing OT. So we've developed a boilerplate for a business case, and then we've got 4 kind of templates that people can use and adapt. The case studies are implementation case studies as well. So they talk about, if you're going to do it, this is what you've got to think about. This is the kind of problems it can help solve. This is some of the things that you need to think about, how you support the OT and those types of things. So it's not, they're implementation case studies, not just a case of there's such and such doing such and such. It's about a little bit more about those roles. So we're just in the midst of doing that. A brilliant piece of work that Jill Pritchard, so she's the housing OT up in Scotland, and she's done an amazing job trying to unpick, when we talk about housing and the roles that OTs can have in housing, what are we talking about? I'm not saying that this is perfect, but at least it gives us a start and helps us unpick that a little bit. So we've identified, we've got a role in terms of new build development and design input, including strategy and planning. So that kind of that neighbourhood communities bit. Work that OTs are doing both in council stock as well as housing association around asset and stock management. Those OTs that are helping actually allocate and the actual allocation of properties as well. So when you're working with an individual and trying to match properties to the right person, so that's looking at housing needs assessment and allocation. That traditional role of adaptations and equipment, the stuff and the work that is being done. So for example, Milton Keynes are very good at this around doing that longer term stuff and supporting people in terms of tenancy support and sustainment. Looking at more individual design of adaptations for people with complex needs. So those are things like your catastrophic injury, the medical legal works that some independent OTs do, some OTs that get involved with very complex adaptations that involve learning disabilities as well as behaviours of concern. So those, it's beyond your normal DFG work. So those really complex, more specialist types of assessments. That role that we can have in terms of supporting hospital discharge and making sure we've got those good housing pathways home. So that separate piece of work, as well as that bit around training and development. We felt that was a separate role when we're working with housing colleagues to upskill them. So as I say, by no means, I'm sure it'll be something that will develop over the next few years, but I think Jill's done an absolutely fabulous job at unpicking, actually, when we're talking about housing and OTs, what are the core roles that we're seeing. So we've got case studies that kind of highlight a number of these. So for example, just talking to one OT, we've been able to develop more than just one case study, but we've got case studies and they will be tagged. Implementation case studies will be tagged to one or more of these core roles that we're seeing emerging from this piece of work. So really good piece of work that Jill's done unpicking that. So this is the bit I need help with, because as we move into the new year, we're going to start planning and looking at, right, okay, hopefully we've got a number of OTs here this afternoon. And even if you're not an OT, if you're a HIA manager, actually, what do your OTs need to help them as we start, moving towards these housing roles? How do we need to upskill? So the practitioner toolkit, again, is likely to be an online resource that is really supporting the frontline staff. We're going to use a kind of public health lens just to give it a little bit of a foundation. And it's about empowering OTs to feel that whatever your role, that you can begin to have that little bit of if you remember, every conversation counts. Yes, you might be an acute OT, but you can start having a conversation with somebody about moving, adaptations, that type of thing, and making you feel empowered to have those conversations. But we need ideas about what you think the resources are. So you're more than welcome to start popping bits and pieces in here. And then I've got my email at the end if you want to send me ideas. But I'm really keen to hear from yourselves about what practical resources would you find really useful to support you with this work going forward. I've just got this here. So those of you that are familiar with Adaptations Without Delay will be kind of familiar with this triangle. And again, it's another really good piece of work that Jill and Shane have done. Again, thinking about the more specialist roles that an OT might have in housing, the more targeted roles that an OT might have in housing, and then kind of the kind of other OTs as it were. So it's this idea that all OTs should be able to have good early housing conversations, empowering people, signposting people to the right information, and enabling people to think about their housing as they look at that self-management or as part of self-management of long-term conditions. So that's kind of the kind of frontline, all other OTs. And then for OTs that are working in the community, be it rehab, reablement, social care, then it's about how do we support that reablement, looking at not only those conversations that all OTs should be able to have, but also then looking at more interventions around tech, equipment, adaptations, as well as other solutions to support timely discharge, as well as preventing people going into hospital. So that kind of preventative work that many community OTs, rehab OTs, reablement, social care OTs are having. And then we've got these more specialist housing roles. So those that obviously cover those other roles that we've talked about, as well as getting involved in strategic planning, design, asset management, dealing with people with much more complex housing needs, and feeding that in. So that's where we kind of see that those kind of really specialist roles, which a number of you will identify with having here today. So I think that's a useful way, I think, in terms of communicating, I think our vision around as being much more joined up, and all OTs feeling that they have some involvement in housing. So what we need from you is, I just need your ideas around what you think would be really helpful. So signposting to resources, websites that you think might be, any training that you might think is really useful, anything, that, if you're a very experienced housing OT, what has helped you on the journey that you've been on. Those that I've been speaking to, I have been asking you those questions. But as I say, if you can get in contact, join us tomorrow, that would be brilliant if you can. And I think, well, Paul's taking my slides off, so I guess I've finished now. So right, thank you so much, and please get in touch.
Thank you, Rachel. I only made it slightly smaller so that you were more.
Oh, did you? Oh, there was. Yes. Can I just put the last slide up? Because I think.
Yeah.
I just want to put the last slide up, because one of the things I've been asking lots of the OTs that I've been saying is, what is it that makes us unique in housing? And I think what keeps coming through is we're almost like translators, or as Jill Pritchard says, we're kind of brokers. So I think we're very good at kind of, and whether our housing colleagues would agree here this afternoon, but I know certainly coming into Foundations, obviously doing work with Paul, is I think as an occupational therapist, I think we can speak the language, we can translate the language of planners, architects, housing colleagues, so that the people that we're working with get it, as well as the other way around as well, helping the people that we're working with understand where our housing colleagues are coming from as well. So it's that kind of bit. I think I've always kind of known it, but I think, yeah, just doing the just doing the project is kind of really clarified that it's we're kind of that translator, that broker in between kind of housing, health and social care.
Do you just want to pop that slide back on so that people have got contact details for what kind of getting in touch? So that's Rachel's email. Please do get in touch and provide any feedback either in the comments or email.
Yeah, desperate to hear from people, because without your input, we're not going to produce what you need. So the more we get your feedback, the easier it make my life anyway. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Rachel.
Foundations Live.
Right. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. We've had a rattle through various aspects of design and caught up on what's happening with housing without delay. Just before we draw to a close, we will be back on the road at the end of February with the DFG Champions Roadshows. And one of the topics we're going to cover is adaptations or kind of DFGs, kind of external DFGs, so kind of ramps, gardens, hard standings, drop curbs, and anything that's not inside a house, basically. So if you've got a case study or an example that you would like to share during the roadshows, please do get in touch. We're always looking for people to share kind of case studies and good practice. And hopefully there's some of you on the call now would be interested in joining us for that. But that's it for this week, apart from one little thing I'll show you in a minute. Next week, we're going to, hopefully, if the internet doesn't break again, we're going to be returning to the webinar we were going to do 2 weeks ago about cold homes or making homes warmer and damp and mold and those sort of things. So we'll be returning with Foundations Live to do that next week. And then we'll be back in the new year with a new series of Foundations Lives, including an introduction to the DFG quality mark, which we'll also be introducing in the new year. So thank you to you all for joining us today. Thank you to Rachel for sharing the details of Housing Without Delay. And as it's coming up to Christmas, I know so many of you enjoy the audio aspects of what we do. We've got a Christmas single out, which is all proceeds going to Foundations Independent Living Trust, which is the charity of the home improvement agency sector. And so please look it up on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Music, iTunes, wherever you stream your music from. Share it far and wide, and maybe we'll make £2.50 to add to Foundations Independent Living Trust. So to finish off today, Santa goes up on a stair lift. See you next time.
Santa's getting older, the stairs are hard to climb. Mrs. Claus said kindly, it happens over time. The elves brought out their toolkits, they worked with festive cheer. Now Santa's gliding upward, the best gift of the year. Santa goes up on a stair lift, up the stairs he goes. Santa goes up on a stair lift, waving as he goes. Santa goes up on a stair lift, laughing soft and low. Santa goes up on a stair lift, ho, 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 ho. They fitted ramps for reindeer and rails along the wall. A brighter light for bedtime, no risk of slips at all. The shower's safe and steady, the kitchen neat and wide. Now Santa's home is cozy with Christmas joy inside. Santa goes up on a stair lift, up the stairs he goes. Santa goes up on a stair lift, waving as he goes. Santa goes up on a stair lift, laughing soft and low. Santa goes up on a stair lift, ho, 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 ho. Now Santa tells the children and families young and old, a safer home's a treasure, more precious far than gold. With grants and help around us, we'll share the gifts we know, so everyone feels welcome when Christmas candles glow. Time moves on, but love will stay. Homes feel safe on Christmas Day. Santa goes up on a stair lift, up the stairs he goes. Santa goes up on a stair lift, waving as he goes. Santa goes up on a stair lift, laughing soft and low. Santa goes up on a stair lift, ho, 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 ho. Santa goes up on a stair lift, up the stairs he goes. Santa goes up on a stair lift, waving as he goes. Santa goes up on a stair lift, laughing soft and low.